Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating Hasidic discourse that completely redefines how we understand true abundance, those deep psychological barriers we all have, and the actual physics of spirituality. You know that feeling when, no matter how much you plan, calculate, or save, you're still left with this lingering anxiety? Well, you are absolutely not alone. We're going to dive into an ancient text that flips the whole concept of economics and success entirely on its head. So let's kick things off with a question that seems super simple but actually forces us to shift our entire paradigm from everyday logic to absolute cosmic truth. What does it actually mean to be truly wealthy? Normally we look at bank accounts, assets, or the security we've hoarded away. But this discourse argues that if you can measure your wealth, you are, fundamentally, impoverished. Crazy, right? True wealth is boundless. It's a state where you only give and you never actually need to receive. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the illusion of logic, the 3 levels of provision, the spiritual blueprint, the timeline of ultimate redemption, and finally, becoming a divine vessel.
Part 1. The illusion of logic. Why intellect leads to doubt.
We start with a really provocative idea from the text. Acting purely on your intellect actually leaves you spiritually and materially broke. There's a brilliant psychological contrast at play here. Think of the fearful, surviving child versus the soul. When you operate as that surviving child, you're constantly calculating. You're asking, will people show up? Will I have enough money? What if it all falls apart? You're terrified of failure because your whole focus is self-preservation. But the soul? The soul operates entirely differently. It's driven by absolute certainty, complete surrender, and a divine mission. It never asks, how will I succeed? It just asks, how can I serve?
The text uses a specific term for this trap, tam v'da'at, which roughly translates to logic, reason, and intellect. When you rely strictly on logic for your survival, you stay poor. Why? Well, because the very nature of human logic always leaves room for a counterargument. For every rational reason to feel safe, your brain can instantly generate a perfectly logical reason to freak out. If you act purely on what you can measure, you're going to be trapped in this endless cycle of hesitation and doubt. To find true wealth, you've got to move beyond logic.
Part 2. 3 levels of provision, from basic needs to true abundance. Let's see how this builds by looking at how the Talmud categorizes material wealth into 3 distinct steps. Step 1 is di machsoro. This is basic survival: food, clothing, shelter, just exactly what you need to exist. Step 2 is asher yechsar lo, meaning whatever he is lacking. This one's fascinating because it refers to customary luxuries. The classic Talmudic example is taking a wealthy man who fell on hard times and providing him with a horse to ride and a servant to run ahead of him. It's more than survival, it's what he's specifically used to. And finally, step 3, ashirut. This is the real deal: true, boundless, infinite wealth. At this level, you aren't receiving anymore, you are simply an infinite channel of giving. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is what the text calls the manna mindset. Imagine 2 people. One goes to sleep with the fridge totally packed with food. He feels perfectly secure because he can literally see his provision. The other goes to sleep with an empty fridge, but he has this absolute, unwavering trust that his needs will be met tomorrow so he can fulfill his mission. The text makes a bold claim. That first man is actually poor because his security is tied to physical things that can easily disappear. The second man? He's vastly wealthy. His security is tied to the infinite. That's the manna mindset, trusting the mission instead of trusting the stockpile.
Part 3. The spiritual blueprint. Mapping the material to the metaphysical.
Now, the text takes those earthly economics we just talked about and maps them directly onto the architecture of divine light. It's a perfect mirror between the physical and the spiritual. These concepts are your ultimate cheat sheet for this entire explainer, beautifully aligning those 3 material needs with 3 specific levels of divine light. Basic provision maps to memole kol almin. Luxury provision maps to sovev kol amin. And true wealth maps to atzmut. Let's break down what these incredible terms actually mean. Mehamo kol almin translates to the light that fills all worlds. This is the divine energy perfectly fitted into the vessel of creation. It's like a soul filling a body. The light animating a rock is perfectly tailored to be a rock. The light animating a plant is tailored to be a plant. It provides exactly what's needed for basic existence and nothing more. This perfectly mirrors dimaxora, that first level of material wealth, just your basic, exact, daily needs.
Next up is Sovev Kol Amin, the encompassing light. This is the transcendent source of life. It can't be contained or boxed in by physical vessels, yet it still belongs to the world and impacts it. This perfectly matches Ashe Iksarlo, those customary luxuries we discussed. It's way more than you strictly need to survive. It transcends basic physical necessity, but it still relates to your specific world and experience.
The text even reveals a stunning grammatical secret hidden in Hebrew to explain this. A tiny little vowel shift completely changes the spiritual physics. Take the phrase Hayi Olamim, pronounced with its sereh vowel. That means life of the worlds. It's grammatically bound and attached to the world. That's our memele light. But make a slight shift to a patach vowel, and it becomes Hay Olamim. That means the living one of the worlds. It's totally independent. It stands alone. That tiny shift represents the massive leap to the Sovev light, a transcendent source that is absolutely not bound by earthly limits.
Part 4. Timeline of Ultimate Redemption, the Cosmic Evolution of Light.
Let's shift our perspective for a second and see how these three levels of light map perfectly onto human history. The evolution of human consciousness actually matches the evolution of these divine lights. Based on a really profound reading of the biblical prophecy of Hosea, which says, "He will revive us after 2 days, on the third day he will raise us up," the text lays out an incredible historical timeline. Day 1 represents our current world, the Garden of Eden, the era of Namala, where light is limited and hidden in nature. Day 2 is the Messianic era, the era of Sovev, where transcendent light becomes much more obvious. And finally, Day 3 is the resurrection, the ultimate redemption, the era of Atzmut, pure divine essence. That is the era of ultimate, boundless wealth.
Part 5. Becoming a divine vessel. Merging the ego with the mission. So, the million-dollar question. How do we actually reach this level of boundless wealth, Atzmut, in our everyday lives, without having to wait for the end of history? Well, to get there, we have to let go of our flawed human logic, which constantly misinterprets how the universe actually works. The text uses a deeply relatable metaphor here. Imagine a father having to forcefully hold his crying child down to get a life-saving vaccine. To the kid's limited logic, the dad is just being cruel. But in reality, that strictness, that gevura, is an expression of intense, deeply protective love. Just like that father, true spiritual teachers and the divine itself will sometimes disrupt our comfortable logic. They'll introduce friction into our lives specifically to heal us and elevate us to a higher state of awareness. There's this surprising anecdote from the text that brilliantly drives this point home. A student actually recounts how his own mother's sweet kisses couldn't compare to 2 literal slaps he received from his teacher, Rabbi Mendel. Now, why on earth would he say that? Because the student had been stuck in his own logical head for months, totally unable to grasp a spiritual truth. Those boundary-breaking slaps bypassed his intellect entirely. They were words from the heart that went straight into the heart. It's a perfect example of how intense moments that shatter our logical framework can sometimes convey far more profound love and clarity than months and months of rational explanation.
To become truly wealthy, to reach that pure Atzmut level, we have to undergo a radical identity shift. The text tells us we need to move beyond being a mere Merkabah, or chariot. Now, a chariot perfectly obeys the commands of its rider, and that's great, but the chariot still exists as a separate thing. To unlock infinite abundance, you have to completely dissolve your ego. You stop being a separate entity just trying to do a good job, and instead your entire reality dissolves until it is simply an expression of the divine will. And this brings us to the core secret of boundless wealth. When you're operating as that surviving child trying to succeed purely on your own merits, you're stressed out, you're fearful, and ultimately you're spiritually impoverished. But when you stop worrying about how you are going to succeed and instead focus entirely on becoming a completely unobstructed channel, letting the mission succeed through you, literally everything changes. You don't take ownership of the success, and you don't take ownership of the resources. You just let the infinite flow right through you. That is true Ashrid. That is what it means to be truly wealthy.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. Are you still acting as that anxious, calculating, surviving child? Are you totally exhausted by trying to logically manage every single aspect of your life? Or are you finally ready to surrender that illusion of control, step way above your intellect, and become a boundless, infinite channel for the divine? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you next time.